I got a question for you, Chris, about conflict in general and how to, like, one of the things we teach in peak performance is the lean in instinct and rising to the challenge and being willing to have that instinctual tendency to just go for things. With respect to conflict, how do you develop that same kind of ability to just lean into conflict, thrive in it, savor it in the same way that you can train yourself to do that with a cold shower or a tough workout?
Repetition. And small stakes practice for high stakes results. And then just be willing to drop into it, say, you know what, I got nothing to lose here. When you feel you got no stake, when you're worried about something, and then you'll try it, you'll be astonished. I mean, just to get some practice in the other day, I called to get some charges taken off a credit card that I completely owed. And I'm just like, you know what, I need to practice. And I'm completely good if they make me pay everything because I owe everything. And I went through it, and the guy was giddy when he waived all the charges. But I just went in just for
You called up your credit card company. You actually owed them money for shit you bought and just talked them out of it.
Well, I paid for the stuff that I bought, but I just flat missed several months' payments in a row. So there was no question that all the late fees and all the interest fees were completely legitimate. And I thought, let me get some practice in. These are legitimate charges. I can't be upset here. So let me see what happens. The guy literally, when I got off the phone, he literally said, completely genuinely, it was a pleasure helping you today. And I thought, the employee of a company I just took money from that I legitimately agreed I should have paid told me it was a pleasure to give me my money back.
That kind of gives rise to another interesting question. What is it, do you think, that was making that a pleasure for him?
Well, everybody else he talked to that day called to beat his ass. So almost every phone conversation he had was an unpleasant conversation. And then in fact, he felt like he was genuinely doing something really great. Sort of, I danced him through it. I mean, I started out, we don't price anchor, but we emotional anchor. And all this is really predictable. I'm calling somebody, customer service rep from a credit card company, and nobody calling him to be nice. And there are enough people that have gotten 10% off by being jerks. They didn't realize they could have gotten 100% off by being nice. They just remember the times they got the 10% off. So I know what this guy's, his emotions are very predictable to start out with. I call him on the phone, and when he picks up the phone, I say, I'm getting ready to make your day ridiculously painful. And there's this long silence on the other end of the phone, and finally this sigh and this acquiescence, because he's got to talk to me. He can't hang up. It's his job. And he goes, okay, what is it? And I go through a couple of more emotional intelligence things. I don't know what he's imagining. I just know whatever he's imagining is a lot worse than me asking for my late fees to be waived. And as soon as I get to my ask, he's like, wow, yeah, I can do that. And now he's the happiest camper on the planet. It was the happiest he'd been all day, probably that week. And so by the time I got off the phone, it was a pleasure to help me just because he felt phenomenal when I got done.
Can you clarify, because it's such an important point, the emotional anchor. Can you clarify what you mean by that for folks?
Yeah, well, we talked about the survival mechanisms in the brain being overly negative. If I just throw something out initially and let his imagination run wild, if I say, I'm going to make your day horrible, you're not going to like what I have to say, this is going to sound harsh, I got a lousy proposition for you, and then just shut up and let their limbic system, their amygdala, take off on them. It's 75% negative. They're going to imagine, God knows what they're going to imagine. Depending upon the circumstances, at least they're going to imagine you berating them intensely and calling them names. That's what they brace themselves for. So whatever happens from that moment forward is better than what they brace themselves for. It's immediately a release. I know how the amygdala works. I know how the limbic system works. If I let it run wild negatively, it will. So let me emotional anchor low, then the entire experience, even if I get nothing, by the time we're done, he's going to feel better at the end than he did when the call started, or what his mindset was before he picked up the phone. So I'm going to leave him in a better place than he was.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.